All right, we're in for a bit of a treat tonight. We've got Hedy Schleifer with us. She's a psychotherapist, a trainer, a relationship coach, a workshop presenter, motivational speaker, and basically she's an expert in the art of relationships and conflict dissolution. And yeah, we've experienced learning about her work through relationships and counseling and stuff like that. So we thought we'd have Hedy on to talk about this, to get into it a little deeper. So welcome to the show, Hedy. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. And I want to tell you, my name is pronounced like the country, Hedy.
Hedy, that's right. Yeah. I had it in my head, and I always mispronounce the guest name. It's a normal thing.
At least 10% of the time.
Part of relationship, is for me to let you know.
Exactly.
That's how it goes.
I can take it. I can take the criticism.
That's right.
I get it from this guy all the time.
Don't point at me.
I am not a proponent of criticism. I think that it never really helps us. I think what does help us is feedback, but feedback is never critical.
Constructive.
It's always constructive. Yeah. Yeah. So I do believe in feedback, in honest feedback, but that is always very constructive. I think criticism just simply hurts, and I don't find it useful.
Yeah, I agree.
So how could you approach that? What would be a good way to approach sort of non-criticism, I guess?
Okay. So I just did a training in Sedona, Arizona. I teach people how to present to an audience. And the course is called Presenting with Boldness, Poise, and Confidence. Because it's a scary thing, to stand in front of people and talk. And so people will come up. So, for example, one woman came up to say something she had learned. And I noticed that her shoulders were very, very tight. And so rather than to say to her, I'm noticing your shoulders are tight, I asked her if she could tell me where her voice was coming from. And she noticed that it was coming from her throat. And so I explained that all of us have an elevator inside of us that goes from the penthouse, which is our thinking, to the lobby, which is our feeling, to the basement where all our raw emotions are. And that many of us, when we talk from the penthouse. And if we talk from the penthouse, then we are really expressing something very smart. However, our shoulders will be very, very tight. And so then she immediately said, it's very true. I live in my head. And I really would like to learn how to take that elevator down to the lobby. And so she then proceeded to experiment what it would be like to speak from her lobby. And for that, she had to really relax her shoulders. And so she did some movements and relaxed her shoulders and began to really speak from a very different place than just her head. Now, I could have criticized what she said, but instead, I asked her a question about the quality of her voice, and she then noticed how tight her shoulders were. So I think what is more useful is to notice something, ask a question about it, and then assist the person in claiming the quality we would love to see them claim. Criticism basically shuts us down, and I don't think it helps.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I shut you down sometimes, Graham?
That's okay.
I'm sorry, buddy. Okay. I'll try and do better.
Ask me a question next time.
Yeah, I watched, me and my wife and I went to Lisa. I'm sure she's listening right now. Hi, baby. We went to I guess an intensive. Is that what they call them? When it was like a
weekend retreat.
Weekend retreat for sex and couples therapy. And it was like 15 hours of sort of in group therapy sort of thing and doing stuff like that. And then she sent us home. Victoria sent us home with a PDF with a bunch of videos to watch, a lot of Marshall Rosenberg stuff, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. And one was your Tel Aviv your Tel Aviv talk on
Okay.
and what really stuck out to me was when you start talking about this sacred space in between people, and it kind of, I mean, it stands out to me for a lot of reasons, for my intimate relationships at home, for my work relationships, and even, I mean, culturally, it seems like, I mean, I don't know if it's a social media thing or if it's a political winds thing, but it seems like in the West we have this, it's polluted everywhere. I mean, even just among strangers and among, it just seems like there's just a lot of, I don't know what the word for it is, but maybe
what's polluted? The sacred space is
yeah,
polluted?
yeah. And I wonder if that is part of what is causing more trouble in intimate relationships. Is this overflow from the culture, or what your thoughts are on that sort of sacred space in between people? Because is that yeah, let's start with that.
Right, right. Well, first of all, I want to tell you, Darren, that it means a lot to me that that the concept was so meaningful to you. And what happens, when the space is polluted, it disconnects us. And so you can see even on the planet, when the space is polluted, and I'm not talking now, environmentally, I'm really talking between people, there's fragmentation, there's division. People begin to see, what is different between me and you, and I don't like you. When the space is held as sacred and people really honor each other, what begins to automatically happen is unification, wholeness. People come together. They see what unites them rather than what divides them. And you can see what you said was right. In the current atmosphere of our world, there is enormous division that is a direct result of the pollution of our emotional space and our relational space. And so learning how to make that space safe and sacred has an amazing result, because it goes right against what causes wars, And what I like to say is that the space between the couple is the playground of the child. And so it's also true about our world, that the space between the citizens of our world is the playground of all our children. And if we hold it sacred, and if we know how to make it fertile and deep and meaningful, we'll have a very different planet. Now, I'm going to tell you, we only need 90 million couples to cross the bridge, to learn how to cross the bridge to each other, and we will have a tipping point, and our planet will have a positive epidemic of a sacred relational space. So I'm extremely committed to get to 90 million couples.
So you think, is that just, that's on a planetary? Is that like, so that'd be 200 million people, and that's, whatever percentage of the population, and that'll get us to the point that
it's 3%. It's 3% of the population. So the research has shown when 3% of the population does something, it becomes a positive epidemic. And so I'm amazingly committed. I really, really want to see our planet suddenly shift, where people begin to really honor each other in their deep humanity.
So, Darren, you were saying it not only in your intimate relationship, but this seems to be something you've been thinking about in all your daily relationships too. So maybe you guys can touch on that. So is that what you meant too? That you're noticing a space between all your relationships then?
Well, I think it is. I can't remember who I was listening to or what book I was listening to or what it was, but it was kind of that same concept, and it broke down, everything. As you can kind of break down your entire reality into one-on-one relationships. A one-on-one relationship with Graham, a one-on-one relationship with Hedy, a one-on-one relationship with each of my children, and then, but I get stuck there too, because it's like, obviously there's some group dynamics as well to it. So I don't know exactly how that looks, but I can definitely see how, maybe a country could have that, or a workplace, or and then that's broken down into a bunch of interweaving little, and you start to see all these little crisscrossing lines all over the place, sort of thing, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And you know, I was thinking, going back, because I just did this training in Sedona, Arizona, this training for people who present. And I start by having them choose a person who somehow on this particular day is dressed just like they are. So it's very funny because suddenly people who have come to this serious lecture arrive and they look for somebody in the room who's got the same clothing approximately, etc. And then I teach them a very fun game in which I teach them 3 gestures: the tiger, the rock star, the person. And they then stand back to back. And then I say 1, 2, 3, and they've got to turn around, face each other, and do the exact same gesture as each other. So sort of be psychically connected. And what's interesting is that these people came for a 2-day retreat to learn how to present. And suddenly they're playing with a partner and they're laughing. And then I have them talk a little bit about the symbol of each one. The tiger is the part of you that has a very big vision, and you are committed to that vision. The rock star is the person in you that can take any obstacle in your life and turn it into a launching pad. The person is the part of you that is connected to others, open and compassionate. And I have them talk a little bit to each other. Who am I these days? Am I more of the tiger? Am I more with a big vision out there and relentlessly pushing forward? Am I more the rock star? Do I have some struggles and obstacles that I want to turn around and see as opportunities? Am I more the person? Am I more connected, more focused on connection right now? And so they talk a little bit. And when they're done with that, I ask them, how is the relational space between us now? And the words are amazing. It's safe, it's fun, it's energized, it's full of laughter, it's creative, it's open, it's, the people, I put all the words on, and then I say to them, as a speaker, you are responsible for the quality of the space between. You may not think of that space. You may think of each person who's here, but what you really are doing is you're creating a safe, fertile, energized space. And you take responsibility for it. And the way I did it, I tell them, is by creating a wonderful game you've just enjoyed. But what it did is it filled the space and made it a happy space of joy and creativity. And so, it's not just between a couple. Yes, certainly it is between a couple. It isn't just in a family. But you can see that you can take a bunch of strangers and you can suddenly create between them a completely new atmosphere that none of them expected and that they just stepped into. All of them dropped, whatever fear they came in with or posture they came in with. All that was gone. And we just had the people who were there, and we could then start our workshop. So, it's really the space between us is invisible, but it is palpable. And when you go to a home where a couple has had a fight and they love you, and when you come in, they go, hey, Darren, hey, Graham. But you know that there's toxicity in the space because even though it's invisible, it's palpable.
You can feel it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you can really you can feel energy from people for sure. So what would be a key thing? What would be a key way to take responsibility for your space? Let's say in a normal day-to-day social work environment kind of thing. So not necessarily with an intimate couple, but how do I create my own inviting space instead of being all tense and stressed about it, let's say.
Yeah. One very good way to enrich the space is through appreciation. So it's, we started out with the word criticism.
Yeah.
And so here is really the very opposite. To really always look for what is it in the other that I can
appreciate. Yeah.
And then actually tell the person about it. And I want to give you a very interesting example. My husband is in the hospital right now. And the good news is he's coming home on Monday and he's doing a lot better. But he's taken care of by nurses. And there was one nurse, a man, who constantly does jokes, but they're not in good taste, and they're a little bit caustic kind of. It's a caustic kind of humor. And I realized that I was starting to resent him and dread him. And if I resent him and I dread him, I'm putting resentment and dread into the space between me and him. And so I decided that morning that on my way to the hospital, I was going to think about what is it that that man is trying to do? What is something I really appreciate about him? And what I realized was that even though it's a bit clumsy, what he's really trying to do is make us smile. He really wants to give us something to be happy about. And so I decided that I was going to go and tell him that. And luckily, when I arrived, my husband was sleeping, and he was the one sitting outside of his room. And I said, Jeff, you know, I've been thinking about you, and I've noticed something. I noticed that at all times, you want to make us smile. You'll always find something to say so that we smile. And I know you do this because you know this is a tough time for us. We're challenged here. Yumi's not well. And you are always making sure, one way or another, and I can see you think about it, to say something that really will lighten the atmosphere. And what was interesting was, he said to me, for the first time really seriously, you're right. I do want you guys to smile, and I do want to give you a good feeling. And it was so amazing because instead of focusing on my resentment and my dread, I focused on the underlying cause that has him say whatever he says. And what was amazing is that in the safety of the space that was between us at that moment, he became much more tender. It was as if the essence of who he is actually began to show up. And it's really interesting to see how once you create safety, and I created safety simply by putting something different in the space between us. Before, I put resentment and dread. Now I put appreciation. But by putting that appreciation, what came from him was different. And so here's an example, you know, that's just with a nurse in a hospital.
That goes back to the golden rule, I guess, kind of in a lot of ways. It's like these underlying rules that you could extrapolate out to, you know, mean these sorts of things. Is like just treat others the way you want to be treated. Yes,
definitely. And you know, as I'm giving you this example, I want to give you another amazing example that I'll never forget. I was in Stockholm many, many years ago. It was 1994. And Scandinavian Airlines was having a strike. And I needed to get back to the States. And so I called them and they said, come at 3 o'clock in the morning, you'd stand in line. Anyway, I came and there were like hundreds of people there in line. But the second guy didn't want to wait any longer and he gave me his number 2. So I was in front of the counter. Anyway, the number 1 goes away. I'm now in front of the counter. The lady looks at my tickets and she shouts at me, you have 2 tickets and there's absolutely nothing I can do for you. Well, now when somebody shouts at you, the old part of the brain, the reptilian brain goes, danger, danger, danger. And you've got to breathe very deeply if you really want to stay there and be human and fill the space with something different. So I took a deep, deep breath. And then I crossed the bridge in my heart to the world where she was. And I landed in the neighborhood of exhaustion. I could tell this woman was exhausted. And so then I did what I teach people in a very compassionate voice. I said exactly what she said to me. I said, I hear you say that I have 2 tickets and there's really nothing you can do for me. And then she looked up because I don't think she had heard like a human voice in a while. So she looked up at me and now we're eyeball to eyeball and she says, no, I haven't slept in 2 days and look at the line I'm going to have to deal with. And I had known that. I felt that she hadn't slept in 2 days or even more. And so now we're looking at each other, and I'm taking a deep breath again. And then I did the same thing that I teach. I was really listening. I said, you're really tired. You haven't slept in 2 days, and you've got this enormous line to deal with. Now she's smiling at me like, who is this woman, And she's smiling at me, and I'm smiling at her. And she says, in a very normal voice, she says, I'm so sorry. I can't do anything for you. And we're like smiling at each other. And I said, yeah, you're sorry that actually you can't do anything for me. She looks at me and she says, maybe I can. She closes the counter. She disappears for 20 minutes. She comes back. She says, here is a gift to you. It's a ticket, Oslo, New York. SAS is losing millions. What's one gift to a nice person? And the idea here is that had I not crossed the bridge, had I been reactive back, nothing good would have happened. But just my willingness to just be with her for a moment allowed her central nervous system to calm down. Mine, I helped mine calm down by just being with her. I helped her calm her central nervous system down. And once she was calm, she could be herself. Who is she? Like all of us, a generous human being when we are who we are in our essence. And so I like to say that what I first encountered was her survival pattern. She was in survival. She was exhausted. She had a line of hundreds of people waiting to knock at that counter. But once she made the connection with me and the space was safe, who I met was her essence, not her survival pattern, but her true essence. And I've never forgotten her, and I bet you she's never forgotten me.
That's amazing. I was going to, that's kind of like, it's sort of along the lines, I lost my train of thought there.
Well, I was going to ask that question, actually, that you already answered, is what to do. Like, starting from a place of appreciation is one thing, but how do you diffuse the conflict? And you just answered it. And
yes.
It's just being very present, it seems to me, with people. It reminds me of some of Eckhart Tolle's work, too, is diffusing that by just being intensely present with somebody.
Exactly right. And the word present is such a good one, because what it really means is that, for example, for me to be present with her meant to let myself feel her in the moment, and I felt, because as humans, we know each other. We've got little tentacles that, touch each other. I could feel her exhaustion, and so it's true about Eckhart Tolle. It's being in the now, completely present, in this case, with the other, but also with myself, because I had to deep breathe after I got, after she shouted, I had to breathe deeply to come back to the present, to be with her.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
So obviously some people, this comes more naturally to than others. Is that a cultural thing, or is that, obviously maybe a parenting thing, or how you're raised, or?
I think that you're pointing to something very important. I think humans who grow up in joyful, loving, caring environments more naturally are present and more naturally know the essence of the other and can reach out that way. People who live in more difficult environments where there's hurt, where there's abuse, where there's trauma, it's harder. It's harder. But I do believe that every single human being can learn this level of presence with one another. But you're absolutely right. I think it comes naturally. But I'm going to tell you another example, because a student of ours in Israel decided to teach the bridge in kindergarten. And so she has these little 3-year-olds cross the bridge if they're going to have a conflict. And so she's got these 2 little guys, and she's got a video of it, where one little guy, they speak Hebrew to each other. "Ata lakachta li et adubi." You took my teddy bear away. And so the other little kid is over the bridge and says, "I hear you say, I took your teddy bear away." He says, "Yes." And it's my teddy bear. It's not your teddy bear. And this little guy goes, it's your teddy bear. It's not my teddy bear. He says, yes. He says, well, tell me more. He says, give me back my bear. He says, I hear you say I should give you back the bear. He takes the bear and he gives it back. And it was just gorgeous to watch this little interaction in which one little kid got to say his truth and the other little kid got to be really present there. And so very naturally, he just gave back the little teddy bear. So, you know, it's sort of, it's our essence to be present that way. But sometimes we have to learn it. And it was clear these little guys.
Yeah, or relearn it.
Or relearn. I mean, and a lot of people are coming out of trauma themselves, maybe, or out of single parent homes, or out of divorce, or out of abuse, or whatever else. So it's that much harder to battle through. Now you touched on the central nervous. Sorry, go ahead.
Yet I was going to say it's natural for us as humans, so we can all learn. For some of us, it comes naturally. For some of us, we really have to learn. But yes, it's natural. You were going to say something about the central nervous system.
Yeah, speaking of trauma, and you touched on the central nervous system earlier. Now, if I'm correct, I've heard you speak before about how you feel it's you need the central nervous system. You need you need another person to. Can you kind of? I'm doing a bad job here, but can you kind of explain that for us?
Absolutely. Well, you know, there's more and more studies on the brain now, and there's a new science called relational neurobiology. And it is the science of what happens to our brain in relationships. And what they've discovered is that, first of all, the brain is the only organ that doesn't regulate from within. Our heart regulates from within, our lungs, our kidneys, our intestines, you know, all our organs regulate from within. Our brain needs another brain to regulate. It's as if we need the eyes of another so that our central nervous system can calm down. And it is only when another is there. So sometimes it can be a dog. You know, dogs are wonderful creatures to assist us in regulating on the inside. We need another. And so what happens when someone looks at us with compassion and soft eyes and acceptance, when somebody looks at us that way, our limbic system, which is the seat of emotion in our brain, and their limbic system, the seat of emotions in their brain, our two limbic systems resonate together. There's a resonance. It's called limbic resonance. And when limbic resonance gets established, then the two central nervous systems calm down. And they call this, in the science now, the brain bridge. So between humans, there is a natural brain bridge. It occurred between me and the woman of Scandinavian Airlines. When we looked into each other's eyes and we smiled, her limbic system and my limbic system started to resonate together. And we had what's called limbic resonance with each other. And when that occurs, the central nervous system of both people calms down. So she calmed down fully, I calmed down fully. And when you are fully calmed down, you can be who you really are. So she was the generous person she normally is. So it's in our brains. And a child, for example, will need our eyes. We can't say to a kid, you know, go to your room, close the door, and figure this out and come when you're calm. Because they need us, our eyes, our understanding, our tender face. They need us for their central nervous system to calm down.
What about when they don't want to, like when my daughter's freaking out and she just wants to get away from me? Do you have any tips for how I can?
Yes.
I mean, first I need to calm myself down, but once I get there.
Exactly. You need to breathe. You need to remember why you love her so much. You need to see her in her essence, and by that I mean the sweetest part of her. And then when she looks at your face and she sees you that way, you'll be surprised. She'll look again, and then she'll look again. She may start shouting, she may start crying, but she'll know you're right there. You're staying present with her. You're not running away from her, and you're not reacting. So it's breathing deeply and remembering at that time, why you love her so much.
And then cross the bridge.
Exactly, and then cross the bridge in your heart to where she might be.
Can you talk about crossing the bridge a little bit more? Because we've said it a couple times now, and just for people to understand what you mean by when you connect in this resonance, then you cross the bridge.
Exactly. So what I like to teach are the three invisible connectors, because what totally disconnects us is our survival dance when we are reacting to each other. But what connects us? So first of all, it's knowing there is a space between us that we want to hold sacred. Second of all, there's a bridge. There's an invisible bridge between people. And that bridge leads me from my world to your world and leads you from your world to my world. And when we cross the bridge, that third invisible connector is what's called the encounter. The encounter is when two people really feel connected. I mean, it happened very fast with me, with that woman in the airport. At the end, we felt totally connected, and that's called the encounter. So there is the relational space, there's the bridge, and then there is the encounter. Now, what does the bridge do? So if I really want to know you, I'm going to need to leave the world called Hedy and come over the bridge to the world called Graham. And then when you talk, all that exists for me is what you're telling me. I've left my own projections and ideas and stories, and I basically have left the past. That's why Edgar Tolle is so smart when he talks about now, because when I cross the bridge, I'm now. I'm here now with you, and everything that's me is in the past. So I leave the past so that I can be here now with you. And when I am now with you, what you say, I take in deeply. I let it penetrate. And I let it penetrate so deeply that I will repeat it when I have allowed it to come in. And so I'm going to give you an example between me and my husband. My husband, many years ago, had some stents put into him. He had a heart attack, and then he had a quadruple bypass, and then he had some stents. And the doctor told him, listen, don't travel, take a rest. You really need that stent to take hold. And when we came home, my husband said, you know what? I'm going to travel. First of all, we're going to go visit my father. His father was at the time 103 years old, and he absolutely wanted to visit his father. And he said, and I want to go to South Africa. We have a plan, and let's go. No way. Anyway, we began to have a struggle over it because I felt like I was right and that he was really not being smart. Anyway, I realized he and I need to cross the bridge over this. And so we sat across from each other, and for bridging, you sit very close, 18 inches.
Would it be pre-planned?
Say it again?
Would that be pre-planned? Like, would you guys...
Yes, we
like
decided...
You don't just go into it. You say, we're going to sit down and we're going to cross the bridge.
We said like this, instead of fighting, let's do what we're teaching. Let's cross the bridge to each other. And so we sat across from each other, really at 18 inches, so we could... At 18 inches, all you see is the face of the other. When babies are born, we look at them at 18 inches and they look at us. And at 18 inches, all you see is the face of the other. Little babies are masters of the face because they're always looking at the face close up like that. So we sat down this way, and then we made a decision. Who's going to be the first host? That means I'm inviting you. And who's going to be the first visitor? That means I'm coming over. And I asked my husband if I could be the first host, and he said, absolutely. And he came over the bridge, and when he landed in my world and I looked in his eyes, I started sobbing, and I said to him, don't die. I'm terribly afraid of losing you. Don't die. And he just held me for a long, long time. And all he repeated was what I said is, so you're really afraid to lose me and you absolutely don't want me to die. And I sobbed for a long time and he held me. And then I felt done. You know, I felt like I had sobbed it all out and it was my turn to be a visitor in his world. And he was the host. And so he called me over and I crossed the bridge and I landed in his world. And he said 3 things that have actually changed my life. The first thing he said is, Hedy, I am not a heart. I am a man with a heart. And when he said that, I understood that I had objectified him. You know, you can see another person as a person, or you can see them as an object. And what I had done to the man I love the most in the whole entire world is I objectified him. I made him into a heart. All I could see was his heart. And I was afraid for that heart. But he was reminding me, I am a man with a heart. And I saw that, you know, the moment you objectify the other, you control them, because I was going to control that heart. And so when I understood what he was telling me, I repeated it. I hear you say that you are not a heart. You are a man with a heart. I said, that's right. And then I said, tell me more. And then he said, that man with that heart wants to say yes to the question, is this a good day to die? And when he said that, I understood that he didn't want to be half dead. Because you know what? When you're half dead, it's not a good day to die. It's a good day to die when you're alive and you're doing your life and you're passionate and doing exactly what you love doing. Then, if death comes, you've lived completely. And so I understood that I was so afraid to lose him that I would rather have him half dead and his body be there than completely dead and I've got no husbands left. So I repeated his statement. The man with the heart that you are wants to say yes to the question, is this a good day to die? And so he said the third thing, and that man with that heart wants to go to South Africa. And so we went. And we had the best trip we've ever had. It was his 70th birthday. And somehow we got upgraded to a suite. We've never even seen one like this. And on the way back, upgraded to first class in South African Airlines. And it was as if, having come to understand what he expressed to me and also understand how afraid I am to lose him, with that knowledge, we arrived at something I call the third option. If there are 2 options, pick the third. The third option was for us to recreate that trip so it was an easier trip than the one we had planned, and a trip we could both stand behind, and that it just became a magnificent trip. And so this is what you do when you cross the bridge. There's a host and there's a visitor. The host invites you into their world, into a neighborhood. Like the neighborhood I invited Yumi in was, I'm afraid to lose you. Yumi invited me into the neighborhood, I'm a man with a heart, not a heart. And that man wants to live passionately. So when he was the host, that was the neighborhood. When I was the host, that was the neighborhood. And that's what you do when you cross the bridge. You're a host, you're a visitor, and you invite each other into the neighborhoods you live in.
So that means there's no but, there's no well or there's no denying the other person they're hurt or whatever it may be.
Exactly. No buts, no, no trying to put in your point of view. You really are learning them. You're a visitor, you're a tourist in their world. And of course you don't rearrange their world, it's their world.
That's an interesting way to look at it, like you're a guest in their home.
And if you were butting or making excuses or not taking responsibility, then you're polluting the space, I guess.
Exactly.
But I don't even think you get the option to take responsibility. You just take it.
Yeah.
You get to take the responsibility when you get back over to the other side of the bridge.
Right. Right. And if you are not changed by the time you come back to your own world, if that visit didn't change you, you didn't really visit. Because it's transformative to hear another person. So, for example, for Yumi, understanding the depth of my fear of losing him was profoundly transformative. And for me, learning about the passionate guy I'm married to, who's not going to stop till he lives passionately every day of his life, you know, that was transformative for me. And of course, I was willing to take that wonderful trip with this amazing guy.
So, some tricks for crossing the bridge. Like, that's obviously, you want to go into that in the right mindset. If like, say you're in a bit of a tussle, you're not getting along, you're arguing or fighting, is it best to maybe schedule that trip for a couple days later?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting what you say, because studies on the brain have shown that when you flip your lid, you know, flipping the lid means that the frontal lobes suddenly are not integrated with the whole brain. The frontal lobe is where you do your thinking, and you're thinking about your thinking. But when you flip your lid, when you're in a tiff, when you're in a struggle, when you are in a conflict, it's as if that part of the brain sort of disconnects, and there's no blood flow between the older part of the brain and the newer part of the brain, which is your frontal lobes. And it takes, on the average, 20 minutes for your brain to reintegrate. So for 20 minutes, you cannot think well. So if you're in a tiff, it's good to wait 20 minutes. You know, after 20 minutes, if you hold on to it longer, you're holding on to it. But for 20 minutes, it takes that long for the brain to integrate. But what's very interesting is the more often you cross the bridge, the more new neural pathways are created in your brain. And those new neural pathways allow the blood flow to continue. And so you are less and less reactive. Your brain becomes more and more relational, so that when you're in a tiff, it only takes you 10 minutes. And then if you're in a tiff, it only takes you 5 minutes. And then slowly but surely, you're not in a tiff anymore, because you have a relational brain. And so I like to say that we are each other's sculptors of each other's brain. We sculpt each other's brain. If we are willing to cross the bridge, we will get new neural pathways for a more relational, less reactive, more intentional brain.
That's something to really consider, because, you know, if I get in the habit of constantly letting my kids get on my nerves, then that's going to wire those neurons too, right? So you got to be hyper aware of that.
Yep, exactly right. And the more you are willing, when your kids, you know, get you mad, the more you're willing to say, wait a minute, let me see what's cooking for them. Let me cross that bridge in my heart and see what just got triggered for them. The more you can do that, the more your brain develops into a relational brain.
How much of this is based on the heart? Like we had the heart math guys on a little while ago, and there's all this science now that the heart is really an underrated organ, and it's got this electromagnetic spectrum that when Darren and I are sitting here, maybe our heart spectrums are overlapping. Like, is that part of this space as well? I mean, there's been a lot of the resonance of the brain, but how about the heart?
Absolutely. I mean, we're one integral whole. And we're the lobby, you know, the penthouse, the lobby, the basement, all that. Nothing. We are integrated beings. Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
So it seems like, you know, this kind of stuff was probably common knowledge maybe a couple thousand years ago. When we didn't have, I mean, because we're living in the age of hyper distractions, you know, cell phones and bills and you name it, you know, something's always calling for our attention. So, I mean, do you think this is...
Darren, it's interesting you say this, because I was telling you about the training I just did in Sedona. And we had a young woman there, 25. She was the youngest one of our community. And she gave a little lecture that was very powerful. She talked about how in her 5 years ago, she used to be able to go to a concert and people didn't have their cell phones and people listened to the music and people jive together, and she could feel the energy of connection. And she said 2-3 years later, he would go to the concert and people had their phones there and taking pictures and videos and being inside. And she felt like a great deal of the connection that really used to occur in these concerts was gone. And that in the group in which she was learning how to present to an audience, she felt that same connection again, that sort of community feeling where everybody is there to support everybody, to be with everybody, to rejoice in the other's strength and encourage them. You know, that's what really was occurring in this training, and that she reconnected with what she had been longing for. That for her, this new way of being inside of a screen made her long tremendously for connection. And it was beautiful because she's 25 and she lives a reality that I certainly haven't known as a younger person. You know, we didn't have any cell phones. And her longing for group connection that she had known earlier in her life.
And it's weird because in some ways we're hyper connected, you know, and it's like you want to keep some of it, right? Because without some of it, we don't get to talk to Hedy and we don't get to have these great conversations.
Yeah,
and
people are listening on their phones.
People are listening right now and they're listening on these phones and it's changing people's lives. But how do you divide that?
It's very, very true. And to find the balance, like when we started, you guys were sitting on your chairs, you were so far away, I couldn't connect with you. You know, you needed to do what you did, which is somehow you got on your screens and I see you much better and I feel like I have a sense of you. Away there, I had absolutely no sense of you. And so I think we have to combine, you know, the capacity. I mean, I would love your faces to be even closer and I would love to be able to make eye contact because I find that I am more inspired when your eyes are available to me. And, you know, and so I think we're going to have to be very thoughtful about what creates connection and the longing that all of us have for connection, and to really make sure that the screen doesn't take over. It's practical, but it can't take over. It can't replace real eyeball to eyeball, heart to heart, basement to basement connection.
You know, that's where the advent of these things like FaceTime and stuff like that really are valuable. I mean, you can see that because people haven't equated that talking on the phone yet, but there's a level of disconnect there too that people sort of took for granted because it's been around for so long, but right. You really notice it when it gets down to pressing numbers with your thumbs. And I mean today I can get caught up and it ruins my day where you know, the social media is good for that, right? You get on Twitter and you start, someone tweets something and you're like, oh, you son of a bitch. And then, you know, all of a sudden your headspace is polluted from some numbers on a screen.
Yes, exactly. And you know, I am embarrassed to tell you that I don't have a Twitter account and I have a Facebook page, but it's being handled. I'm not entering it. I mean, I'm very much a 20th century person, or very much a 22nd century person. The century where we will come back to each other and we will cross the bridge to each other and we'll look into each other's eyes and we'll hold hands and we'll, you know, do all the human things that we need to do. So I'm very much a 22nd, let's call it the 22nd century.
I could see that. I mean, there seems to be some movement back to that already. Like definitely, like we do another show where that's, you know, basically focused on personal questions and feelings for men and stuff like that. And that's been more popular than we would have thought was possible. And we do shows like this and they're more popular than we thought they would be. So there's a yearning for this out there and people are just starting to get comfortable talking about it. So, I mean, exactly. I don't think your goal is out of the realm of possibility.
Right. And a yearning is a good word. We long for, we yearn. And this young woman, the 25-year-old, she was yearning for these concerts she used to go to, where she felt a connection with the hundreds and hundreds, because they were together and nobody was escaping to any other spot. They were there. They were present, you know that word again. They were present at the concert. And she's yearning for that kind of, it's called entrainment. You know that word? It's like birds. You know how you see a flock of birds and they go together, they turn together, and fish in the sea, you know how they go like this? Well, people also get entrained, and concerts are beautiful places where if people are really present, they'll get into entrainment, and they'll be just together, and that feeling is awesome. You know.
Do you have? Go ahead.
I was going to say a jazz ensemble, or suddenly they'll be in entrainment, and you can feel it. Or even a sports team. You know, the sports team that gets into entrainment, they'll win because it's that magical, wordless connectedness in which they're now one.
You can definitely notice when you're in that environment, or when, you know,
Yes.
so I mean, that stuff's all real easy when you're in that environment. I think it's been, you know, it's definitely not something we learn coming up these days. Like, I mean, I'm 38. I think I'm 38, and I'm just sorting this stuff out now, you know, just starting when I was, you know, in my late 30s. So I mean, there's some hope that'll get into the kids a little bit, hopefully. But what are some tricks, you know, where can our listeners start? Because there's a ton, we get emails all the time there's couples that listens to the show together, and, you know, I assume most of our listeners have a significant other. So what's an easy way to sort of get into that space for someone that's coming into it with, I mean, Graham and I have both done a little bit of work, but I mean, let's assume someone's just coming in off the street. They're just, you know, they're pissed off. They're watching cable most of the time, watching sitcoms, you know, all that stuff. And, you know, where's the entry level for someone who's, you know, as far away from your position as they can be?
You know, I really recommend that TED Talk that you watched, because it's very basic. You know, it explains in a very basic way. I think you remember, with how I polluted the space between me and my mom, because I would visit her in the old age home, and I was so mad that she was there and that she was alone, and she's my hero, and why is she there? And I would pollute the space because all I put in there was my own disappointment and anger and guilt. And I finally decided one day I'm just going to cross the bridge to be with her. And so I crossed, and I left my world, you know, my neighborhood of guilt and anger and upset. And I just landed with my mom, and I looked in her eyes and she looked in mine. And suddenly she said in Yiddish, "Du bist meine Tochter, you are my daughter." She recognized me. She hadn't recognized me for months, but she hadn't recognized me because I didn't show up. I wasn't in her world. And suddenly, just landing there and looking in her eyes and just being quiet and loving and breathing and looking at her, she saw me and recognized me. And so every time after that, when I went to visit her, I just crossed the bridge to be with her. And we sang together, and she held my face, and sometimes I would cry and she'd wipe my tears. So there was between us a connection that could only occur when I was willing to leave every neighborhood of my world and come over and be with her. And that was really, for me, a real beginning to understand the simplicity and depth of crossing the bridge. It's to be with the other. And I think the TED Talk that I did is a wonderful way for people to begin to understand the basics. After that, there's a lot of YouTubes on my website that people can begin to look into and actually learn from. You know, just watch another couple cross the bridge, and it'll show you how you do it. And you will identify, because, you know, couples are couples are couples. So that's a very good way to enter into the how-to of it.
What about the personal daily practice? Like, do you have anything that you do that practice that, you know, helps you stay in the moment or get in the moment, like any meditation or prayer? Or do you recommend anything like that for people that they can do it on their own as well?
You know, you're talking about two very important parts of life. One is prayer. And I love to pray. You know, I pray very simply. I speak, you know. My prayer has two parts. One is gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just so grateful, you know, to be alive, to have a husband, to have kids, to have grandkids, to be married. On Sunday, it'll be 54 years.
Wow.
Congratulations.
So grateful, you know, for life itself. And a lot of my prayer is gratitude. And I think that piece is a wonderful piece for people to land into their real life, to begin to look around and to just give thanks. You know, I'm thinking right now, there's a lovely book by Anne Lamott, and it's called Help, Thanks, Wow. And I was heading that way. She says, one very big thing, and that's also part of prayer, is asking for help. And it's so important to be able to turn to the people who are in our life and be vulnerable enough to say, you know, I need you. I need some help right here. And so that's one big piece of prayer is help. But the other one is thanks. And the importance of really looking around us and just counting our blessings. You know, some people make it a practice every night in a journal, 3 gratitudes. And then the last one is wow. And wow is to be amazed at life itself, at children, at nature, at the springtime, at, you know, it's the wow kind of expression of life. And those three, she says, when you do those three, you're in the present. Help, thanks, wow.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, they've shown that gratitude, being in a state of gratitude, changes your physiology. And we just had a guest on who did the documentary "You Are What You Act," and saying "wow," like we were actually practicing that in the show. It changes the way you feel. It really, if you act like wow, it does change you.
Wow.
Absolutely, absolutely. And those three, you could call them prayer.
Yeah.
Help, thanks, wow.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's important. I mean, people should go check out those videos because that's, you know, it's something that, you know, I think everyone's sort of guilty of taking for granted, are those important relationships, you know, especially the people closest to you. You don't, you know, you never think, you take them for granted on the levels of that they're going to be around all the time, and not even on the level that you're leaving a lot on the table if you're not doing this kind of stuff. And I mean, especially when you look at, you know, the books coming out on the opposite of addiction is connection, the opposite of this is connection, you know, suicide's a connection problem, drinking's a connection, you know, they're saying everything, it all seems to go back to this lack of connection and community.
Yeah. And you know, what's important here is the view that I have is that we are born in connection. The disconnection isn't really natural for us. It happens from hurt, and then reconnection heals us. Yeah, so we are connected beings. That a baby born is already connected. And when you continue to stay connected, then you're just in your essence. And you can always come back to your essence and reconnect. So it is our essential nature as human beings. We are connected beings.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing. Yeah, it makes
it's important.
Sense. Yep.
It's important. Any before we wrap up here, is there any closing nuggets you can drop on us, especially for, I mean, I think a lot of this stuff is sort of not in our regular wheelhouse. So this is, I mean, whenever we do a show like this, we assume that most of the audiences is going to be fairly fresh for.
Let's see. Let's see. What is it that I would like to give as a closing? Ah.
Before you do that, I do have another question though.
Okay.
Before it might create a little bit of space here too. Is there, with all the couples that you've seen and all that, is there soul mates, that type of thing? Like, have you met couples that they resonate like right away with each other? They kind of are on the same kind of wavelength. They have that automatic, that space in between them is there. It's easier to cross the bridge. Like, what are some people always connected with the bridge and you don't have to cross over?
You have to cross over.
Yeah.
You know why? I'll tell you. Because people, even when they're soulmates, are different.
Yeah.
And they have a different language. I say that a good marriage is bilingual, that you learn the language of your partner. So, for example, I speak Hedy, but I also speak Yumish. You see, my husband Yumi, I speak his language because I've learned it. And so people are, especially if you fall in love, you're going to be incompatible. You're going to be different. As a matter of fact, the grandmother of a friend used to say, if the two of you are the same, one of you is superfluous. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So a couple are two very different people, two very different cultures, two very different languages. And so you really have to be able to cross to get to know who this other person is. And in knowing them and embracing the difference, you grow and you flourish and you become your potential, And so maybe that's what I would like to finish with, that, we have an unlimited potential as humans of intelligence and creativity and funniness and learning capacity and depth. And we have an unlimited potential. And it's in a deep, connected relationship that we create a little laboratory to claim our potential. And my vision is that our planet will be populated by these little laboratories where everybody is committed to help each other claim their full humanity and their full potential. And so when we have a planet that's got these little living laboratories all over the place, everyone helping each other, claiming your fullness and your aliveness, we will have a very good planet.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something to look forward to, getting to that place. I mean, I think the world needs it now, more than ever. I mean, it's, we got divorce rates that are crazy, and you got people fighting in the streets, and it's a mess. There couldn't be better timing for a show like this.
Yeah, let's get to that 90 million.
Yes. Amen to that. I enjoyed so much getting to know you guys a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
I love your style, relaxed and just conversational. And I enjoyed it very, very much. Great. And I thank you for this time.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you for coming on. Awesome. We'll link to the TED Talk in the show notes and your website and all of that stuff for sure. It'll all be in the show notes. And like I say, I think it's important people check that out and make sure... it's time to get our shit together. Yeah. We've got through the Industrial Revolution and all this other stuff.
I agree with you more than. Okay, well, good.
Awesome, thanks.
Right on. Come back anytime.
Okay. Bye-bye.
And that was our chat with Hedy Schleifer.
You got the name
Schleifer.
Right.
I got the wrong name.
So that was interesting. Nice quick thinking on the face cams, eh?
Yeah, that was good.
Zoom doesn't make it easy.
No, that was pretty good.
Too bad
though.
It's such a resource hog. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Because it just chews things up. Anyway, huge thanks to Hedy for coming on the show. We apologize for messing up her name a couple of times.
Then I got it wrong in the outro too. Schleifer. I got the last name wrong this time.
So,
yeah.
I just would have not went with the last name.
Just don't criticize me. Just be constructive. Ask me
at least on this episode I won't.
Say, what do you think her name says?
Well, how do you think it's pronounced? That could come off as, you know what is interesting is if you don't do that with all your compassion, you're going to come off as a dick.
If you don't do what?
You know, like when you do that, repeating what people say and stuff like that, like you can't half-ass
so?
that.
Oh, you think? Yeah, maybe, eh?
Like, can you?
Because you might come across a little bit. So what you're telling me is,
yeah, you could come off as condescending, right? You've got to make sure you're doing the eye contact and doing everything else.
So what I hear you say is,
yeah, right.
You think I'm a jerk, or whatever.
You could see it if you don't. You can't half-ass it.
Did you guys learn that in that imago in your couples stuff too?
Imago?
That's the name of this repeating back and forth, like the type of imago.
We learned that it is
like
compassionate communication.
Okay, because it'd be like, so Darren, I heard that you learned compassionate communication. So what I hear is you learned compassionate communication.
No, I'm learning. I'm trying to learn.
So what you're saying is you're trying to learn. So it'd be that like that's imago or whatever. That's how I learned it. But now it might be called compassionate communication.
Yeah, it's art. I mean,
or that's a derivation from it, maybe.
The funny thing is that you notice that in everything. Once you start to focus on how big a factor miscommunication is in the world, and in anyone.
That's what we were trying to get at before.
In any of your relationships. Yeah. You can kind of extrapolate that to all of your relationships. And it's like, then you can sort of start trying not to get triggered. But it's like, sometimes I'll see a text now, like I'll notice it in work things where I'll tell someone to do something in a text and they'll do something different. And I'm like,
what?
Okay, I'm going to go back, reread my text and see. And half the time it's my fault.
Yeah,
it's like I assumed that their brain's working the same as my brain, and no one's brain is working the same as yours ever.
Yeah,
especially not if you're a different.
You're assuming that they're going to take it this way, especially with text. I mean, it can really be taken, like you were saying before. If you miss a comma or a little bit of punctuation, it changes the way the sentence means. Right? Is that a question or a statement? Like
the text you take in your own space. So wherever you're at,
yeah.
You'll take it. You start to notice that if you're in a great mood, all the texts are good.
Yeah.
If you're in a bad mood, this guy.
Yeah.
Everyone's fucking with you.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a great chat. We got to do more shows like that.
You know what my daily prayer is?
What?
In the morning, I ask for help. In the night, I say thanks.
Do you?
Yeah.
What do you ask for help with?
Stay clean and sober today.
Attaboy. Why were you thinking about? Were you thinking about not staying clean and sober?
No. It's just it's what she was saying, being vulnerable, asking for help. Because that's
the thing is, you got to stay
before
enough to not repeat yourself every night.
What?
Like you can't just keep doing the same 3 things.
Yeah, you can. If it's that, you can say thanks every night. Yeah, you say thanks every night.
But shouldn't you try and think of a new thing to be grateful for?
Oh, that's different. That's the gratitude things.
Okay.
That's thanks is part of it, but. Gratitude can be the journal. It can be the whole.
What did you do yesterday for your help?
I just said thanks for help. It's thanks for helping me stay clean and sober today. Like it's thanking.
Is that every day?
Well. Yeah, every day.
That's the same one.
Yeah, and I used to do a gratitude journal. I don't anymore. Like real gratitude journal, or list 5 things that you're grateful for. That kind of stuff. So I haven't done that physical, like writing down what you're grateful for.
Discipline is hard.
I try and say thanks. I mean, at least every night.
Tough. One of the tougher things is discipline, whether it's exercise or journaling or yoga or whatever it is I'm trying to stick to. It seems to be.
Well, we stuck to this I was thinking about that the other day.
And quitting smoking. I was thinking that the other day. It's been 5 years almost now that I quit smoking.
I can't believe that.
I couldn't imagine smoking again.
Yeah.
Because you know what it is? It's because they say it's 10 years till your lungs are better.
What? Really?
10 years till your lungs are fully repaired. I'll just
be right there
like you never smoked. And I was thinking I'm almost halfway there. And you know what? That stat used to talk me out of quitting smoking. Because 10 years, what's the point? Yeah, exactly, right? So it was like, I don't know if it was made to make me quit, but it didn't work. But now it's exciting to think that I'm halfway there.
I made it finally.
My lungs are better?
I think my lungs are better. I think it was November 11th, 2011. No, 2009. November 999, maybe September 9th, 2009, maybe.
When did we start the show? 2013?
Yeah.
And I quit in 2015.
So September 20, so I got a few months to go maybe, yeah.
So I'm not till January really. So I'll be 5 years in January.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
No,
it's a lot of cigarettes,
it went by
not
fast. I mean, you got off it pretty quick.
A lot of podcasts too. hundreds and hundreds and
Every
hundreds
week.
of podcasts.
Every week.
Free.
Every
week, more than once a week for coming on 6 years.
Yeah.
It'll be 6 years.
What's
Holy
our
shit.
anniversary again? May.
It's in like 3 weeks.
Is it?
Yeah. 3 weeks till the 6-year anniversary. Grimerica.ca/support, guys.
Well, by the time this comes out,
it'll be past. It could be past. No, it'll be close.
Right,
No, it's still 2 months. Sorry, we're still.
No, it's April, May. It's the end of May. So so a month and a half.
We'll call it June 1st. So Grimerica.ca/support, guys. Maybe for a 6-year anniversary, you can head over, sign up for a monthly. If you already got a monthly, maybe do a one-time donation. Whatever floats your boat. We don't care how you support us, as long as you consider us supporting us monetarily. You can send us in some content. You can share the show. It's getting harder and harder to share the show, especially with our more controversial content. So you should just share the show. Tell your friends. Share it on social media. Whatever you can do to get the show out there. Do everything in the show notes. What else? Sign up for the newsletter.
Send some gifts to the P.O. box if you want.
Yeah, it's always fun to get stuff at the P.O. box. Dirty socks.
Leave a voicemail or a text. Did you say that?
No, I can't. The chair's in the way of the phone number.
1-403-702-6083.
That's right.
It's a studio phone.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We should do phone calls.
Well, I was thinking that we should do the thing is you got to be best to pre-plan it, I think.
Well,
But yeah, we could just sit in here and take calls for a couple hours.
Well, no, I meant in a show.
Oh, just have the phone on during the show? I don't want to get into that. The next thing you know, the phone will be ringing during interviews, and we should just let its voicemail stays off unless they call in the.
Oh, we could say review the show. You probably did already
review the show.
Because there's been a little bit of a stretch of reviews. We got a good 1-star to read on the next intro. That'll be fun. We're drowsy.
Drowsy Canadians, lazy Canadians, stoned Canadians.
Drowsy. Drowsy was one of the names of one of my D&D characters.
You should try it on.
Drowsy. One of my first ones in the new version.
You should try it on 3/4 speed and see how drowsy we sound. Anyway.
Just speed it up, yeah.
Do all that great stuff. Check out Hedy's website. Support the show. Have a good weekend. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Okay, so it's already 10:02. We're not going to do an intro in between.
We don't have to do some 13 questions.
Yeah, we can do those, but I'm not going to live those.
No.
But we can do those. So
Okay,
let's say bye to live people.
say
We'll
bye
be
to
back.
live people.
We'll be back in 45 minutes. We're back.
Oh, amazing chat.
Is this the video that I
With
watched on
Eric.
mushrooms?
What? No.
No? Different
I don't
video?
think so.
This isn't the video of the spaceship with the crazy music and all that stuff? No. I like that one.
No.
Anyway, guys, so we'll be back in 45 with our second interview.
Spiritual alchemy. A contemporary explanation. An 800-page contemporary explanation.
Say so. And you click.